Leaving the hazy, paradoxical world of Virginia behind, you drift north again. But this time, you bypass the rigid austerity of New England. Your destination is a younger, more idealistic colony, one founded on a principle that feels startlingly different from the others. You've arrived in Pennsylvania, the holy experiment of William Penn, and you can feel the shift in the social atmosphere almost immediately. The air seems less charged with judgment. The faces of the people you pass seem less severe. Here, the legal foundation isn't built on enforcing a singular, state-mandated piety, but on the radical Quaker belief in the inner light present in every single person. This core belief translates into a legal code that is, for its time, remarkably humane and progressive. In 1682, shortly after his arrival, Penn and his council enacted the Great Law, a body of legislation that stands in stark contrast to the harsh penal codes of both England and the other colonies. You wander into a public square, perhaps in the fledgling city of Philadelphia, and you don't see the familiar architecture of punishment, the stocks, the pillory, the whipping post. They are conspicuously absent. Under Penn's code, these forms of public humiliation were largely abolished. The rationale was simple and profound. Quakers believed that since God could be found in everyone, then every life was sacred. To shame, maim, or degrade a person publicly was to defile the divine spark within them. Instead of focusing on retribution and public spectacle, the Great Law focused on rehabilitation and reflection. You learn that prisons in the Pennsylvania model were not intended to be dungeons of misery and despair. They were conceived as workhouses, places where an offender would be removed from society. Yes, but also given time for quiet contemplation and taught a trade, so they could return as a productive and reformed member of the community. It's an idea that was centuries ahead of its time, the distant ancestor of the modern concept of a correctional facility. The list of capital offences was also dramatically reduced. In England, a person could be executed for a bewildering array of crimes, including many forms of theft. In Puritan New England, offences like blasphemy or adultery could also carry a death sentence. In Penn's Pennsylvania, however, only two crimes were deemed worthy of capital punishment: murder and treason. It was a staggering reduction in state-sanctioned killing, a direct reflection of the Quaker testimony against violence. This spirit of tolerance extended to religious freedom as well. While Penn himself was a devout Quaker, his law guaranteed religious liberty to anyone who believed in God. This was not the grudging, limited tolerance of a place like Maryland, which was established for Catholics, but was still fraught with tension. This was a broad foundation principle. As long as you lived peacefully with your neighbors, you could be a Mennonite, a Lutheran, a Moravian, or any other variety of Protestant. This made Pennsylvania a powerful magnet for waves of immigrants from across Europe who were fleeing religious persecution. The result is a society that feels more diverse, more cosmopolitan than the English-dominated colonies you've visited so far. You hear German dialect spoken in the marketplace, see the simple, distinctive dress of various pacifist sects. However, even in this enlightened, peaceable kingdom, there were still some peculiar bylaws rooted in Quaker morality. While they didn't legislate piety with the same iron fist as the Puritans, they did legislate against what they considered rude and riotous behavior. The Great Law included provisions against stage plays, gambling, card games, and all prizes, cockfighting, and the like. These were seen as frivolous, vain pursuits that distracted from a quiet, productive life. It's a gentler form of social control, a legal code that essentially says, you are free to worship as you please, but we'd really prefer you didn't host a rowdy poker night. Historians still debate the long-term success of Penn's utopian vision. As the colony grew and prospered, the non-Quaker population swelled, and the pressures of the outside world, especially the demand for participation in colonial wars, put immense strain on the founding pacifist principles. Eventually, the Quakers would lose political control of the very colony they founded. But the legacy of the Great Law endured. It established a blueprint for a more tolerant, multi-ethnic society and enshrined legal principles that would later find their way into the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights. As you stand in a quiet Philadelphia street, you realize you're in a place that dared to believe that a society could be built on persuasion rather than punishment, on conscience rather than coercion. It's a quiet, radical dream being tested in the American wilderness.